February 14, 1968, Phuoc Tuy Province. While Australian SAS ghosts were achieving an 18-to-1 kill ratio and terrorizing the Viet Cong with silent four-man patrols, American MACV SOG teams 200 kilometers north were calling in B-52 strikes on enemy headquarters across the Cambodian border and extracting high-value targets from denied territory. Both were elite jungle warriors, both were tactically brilliant, but one force racked up strategic victories, while the other, despite their legendary skill, couldn't touch the enemy where it mattered most. So what invisible line separated tactical perfection from strategic impact? And why were Australia's finest fighters forced to watch enemy sanctuaries they could never reach? The question hangs in the humid air like the morning mist that clings to the jungle canopy over the Australian tactical area of responsibility. Why couldn't Australia's elite SAS match the legendary cross-border operations of America's MACV SOG? The answer isn't about courage. It isn't about skill. It's about something far more complicated, something that would become painfully clear in the weeks ahead. Nui Dat Firebase sits in the middle of 120 kilometers of rainforest, so thick you could hide an army in it, and someone has. Intelligence reports estimate 1,500 Viet Cong fighters from the D445 Battalion and 274th Regiment moving through these trees. They know this jungle. They were born in it. They use it like a weapon. Sergeant David Morrison leads a four-man patrol from one squadron SAS regiment. They call him Davo. Right now, Davo is deep in the long, high hills, 9 days into a mission that has tested every limit of human endurance. His team has moved 800 meters per day, not kilometers, meters, through vegetation so dense that you can only see 5 meters ahead, sometimes less. The air feels like breathing through a wet towel. Humidity sits at 95%. Each man carries 40 kilograms of equipment strapped to his back: ammunition, water, rations, radio batteries, medical supplies. The weight never gets lighter. Your shoulders scream, your knees ache, your feet blister inside boots that never dry. The cicadas scream so loud they drown out normal conversation. But if you know how to use that sound, it can hide your movement. The SAS knows how to use everything. Morrison's team has made contact once in 9 days. They spotted 15 VC moving supplies along a trail. The team didn't fire. They watched. They counted. They noted the direction of travel, the type of weapons, the condition of the enemy soldiers. Then they moved back into the jungle and transmitted the intelligence to headquarters. No shots fired. Mission successful. That's the Australian way. But 200 kilometers north, across an invisible line called the Cambodian border, American MACV SOG teams are doing something completely different. They're running operations into enemy territory that's supposed to be off limits. They're hitting North Vietnamese Army command posts. They're calling in B-52 strikes that flatten entire supply depots. They're grabbing enemy officers and pulling them out of the jungle for questioning. They're authorized to go where the enemy thinks he's safe. They bring the war to places the enemy thought the war couldn't reach. Morrison doesn't know all the details. He doesn't need to. What he knows is that his patrol can watch and report. They can fight when cornered. They can call in artillery when they find good targets, but they cannot cross certain lines on the map. Canberra has made that very clear. No operations into Cambodia. No pursuit beyond Phuoc Tuy Province. The SAS can patrol, observe, and report. They cannot reach the enemy where he lives, where he trains, where he keeps his supplies safe. The jungle presses in from all sides. Heat rises from the ground in waves you can almost see. The smell of rotting vegetation mixes with the chemical smell of insect repellent that stopped working hours ago. Mosquitoes swarm in clouds. Leeches drop from leaves and crawl inside your uniform before you notice. You stop checking after a while. There's always another one. Morrison's radio operator taps his shoulder. Message coming in. The operator writes it down on a pad already soggy with sweat. Intelligence reports. NVA headquarters elements operating from base area 367, just 15 kilometers away, across the border, in Cambodia. Morrison pulls out his map. The plastic coating is scratched and worn. He finds base area 367 with his finger. Right there. 15 kilometers. His team could reach it in a week of careful movement. They could observe it. They could call in airstrikes that would turn it into a smoking hole in the ground. They could gather intelligence that might save Australian lives back at Nui Dat. But that line on the map might as well be a concrete wall 3 meters high. Political decisions made in comfortable offices in Canberra have drawn that line. Australian forces will not expand the war beyond South Vietnamese territory. The policy is absolute. The reasoning probably makes sense to politicians. Out here, it just means the enemy has a safe place to hide. Morrison folds the map and tucks it back into his pocket. He looks at his 3 men. They're exhausted, filthy, alert, professional. The best soldiers Australia has ever produced. They can move through this jungle like smoke. They can call in artillery within 10 meters of their own position. They can survive for weeks on half rations and rainwater. They've proven it again and again. But all that skill, all that training, all that sacrifice hits a wall at the Cambodian border. The enemy knows it. He uses it. He retreats across that line when things get hot. He builds his headquarters just out of reach. He trains his soldiers where Australian patrols cannot go. He stores his weapons and ammunition in sanctuaries that Australian expertise cannot touch. The realization settles over Morrison like the humidity. It's been there for months, but it crystallizes in this moment. Tactical excellence is being strangled by strategic handcuffs. His team can be perfect within the boundaries they're given, but perfect tactics inside a box are still trapped in a box. The enemy outside the box doesn't care how good you are. He just cares that you can't reach him. Morrison checks his watch. 1,400 hours. 6 more hours of daylight. They'll move another 400 meters before dark. Set up a hide position. Listen through the night. Move again at first light. Day 10 becomes day 11, becomes day 12. Professional, excellent, constrained. Somewhere 15 kilometers away, enemy soldiers laugh around cooking fires in a base they know is untouchable. And the best jungle fighters in the Australian military can only watch the map and wonder what they could do if someone would just let them cross that line. Australian SAS patrols perfect what they're allowed to do. 4 men move through Phuoc Tuy Province like ghosts that leave no trace. Patrol commander, scout, signaler, medic. Each man knows his job so well he could do it in his sleep. They cover 1 to 2 kilometers per day, sometimes less. Americans think this is crazy slow. Americans are wrong. The teams operate for 14 to 21 days without coming back to base. No resupply drops, no helicopter visits, nothing that would give away their position. They eat half rations to make the food last longer. A man gets hungry, a man stays sharp. By late 1968, the kill ratio reaches 18 enemy dead for every 1 Australian casualty. 18 to 1. The numbers don't lie. Corporal Bob Kearney arrives fresh from Perth in March 1968. He's completed the selection course. He's fit, motivated, and ready to kill communists. Morrison takes him aside on his first day in country. They sit in the shade of a rubber tree near the perimeter wire. Morrison speaks quietly, like he's sharing a secret. "Aggressiveness gets you killed here," Morrison says. "The Americans crash through the jungle in 30-man patrols. They make noise. They leave trails. They think firepower solves problems. Sometimes it does. Usually it just announces where you are. We're different. We're ghosts. We see everything. We touch nothing. We kill only when it serves intelligence value." Kearney doesn't understand yet. He will. Training emphasizes what Americans call impossible. Silent movement through elephant grass that crackles like firecrackers under American boots. Reading jungle sign that's 12 hours old. A broken spider web. Disturbed leaf litter. Vegetation bent in a direction it shouldn't bend. Each sign tells a story if you know how to read it. Firing discipline becomes almost religious. SAS teams sometimes observe enemy formations for hours without shooting. They count weapons. They note unit patches. They watch where the enemy goes and what he does. Then they fade back into the jungle and call in the information. Sometimes they call in artillery. Sometimes they just watch and report. The intelligence is worth more than bodies. Navigation has to be perfect. These teams call in artillery danger close at 100 meters. 100 meters means the shells are landing close enough that you feel the concussion in your chest. Close enough that shrapnel whines overhead. Close enough that one mistake in your map coordinates kills your own team. The SAS doesn't make those mistakes. Kearney learns to unlearn everything. Move slow. Breathe quiet. Watch everything. Trust your training. Trust your team. Don't trust your aggression. The jungle rewards patience. The jungle kills cowboys. By mid-1968, the Viet Cong have a new name for Australian patrols: Ma Dai Loi, ghost soldiers. The VC circulate warnings. Australian patrols appear from nowhere. They strike without warning. They vanish before you can react. Units that encounter them suffer heavy casualties. Units that survive spread stories that make other units nervous. Viet Cong operating procedures change. Larger formations with more security elements. Avoidance of certain valleys where SAS patrols dominate. New protocols for movement and camping. The enemy adapts because the enemy respects the threat. Fear is a weapon too, but tactical brilliance hits a geographic ceiling. Morrison's team can dominate Phuoc Tuy Province. They can make the enemy afraid to move in certain areas. They can gather intelligence that saves Australian lives. They cannot cross into Cambodia. That's where the story changes. When Australian SAS did conduct raids, they were devastatingly effective. Ambushes, lightning strikes on enemy camps, quick assaults on supply caches. But every raid happened inside Phuoc Tuy Province. Every target was within authorized boundaries. The raids were brilliant. The raids were lethal. The raids couldn't reach the enemy's strategic depth. Across the border, Staff Sergeant Ken Carpenter leads a 12-man team from Command and Control North. 3 Americans and 9 Montagnard fighters. The Montagnards are tough little mountain people who hate the North Vietnamese with a passion that makes Americans uncomfortable. They're perfect for this work. Carpenter's team runs Operation Salem House. That's the code name for cross-border operations into Laos. They're hitting North Vietnamese army logistics on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. The trail isn't really a trail. It's a network of roads, paths, and supply routes that run through Laos and Cambodia into South Vietnam. The NVA moves thousands of tons of supplies down this network every month. Weapons, ammunition, food, medicine, everything an army needs to fight. SOG teams operate under completely different rules. They have authorization to cross into Cambodia, Laos, and even North Vietnam. They get immediate tactical air support. F-4 Phantoms on station overhead. AC-130 gunships with enough firepower to level a small town. Bright light teams, standing by for emergency extraction under fire. Authority to call in B-52 arc light strikes on targets they find. Permission to engage in direct action missions, not just watching and reporting. Carpenter's team discovers an NVA truck park at a location called BP-47. 40 vehicles hidden under camouflage netting. Ammunition storage bunkers. Fuel depot with drums stacked 3 high. Security is light because the NVA thinks they're safe in Laos. They're wrong. Carpenter calls in the airstrike. Takes 30 minutes. F-4 Phantoms roll in with napalm and high explosive bombs. The truck park erupts in flame and thunder. Secondary explosions rip through the ammunition storage. Fuel drums launch into the air like rockets. The explosions are visible from 20 kilometers away. Smoke rises in a black column that takes an hour to dissipate. Enemy casualties estimated at 150 to 200 dead. Strategic impact measured in disrupted supplies for 3 NVA regiments for 2 weeks. 14 days where those regiments have less ammunition, less food, less fuel. 14 days where they can't launch operations because their supply chain is broken. That's strategic impact. The difference isn't capability. Australian SAS could do the same thing. They have the training, they have the skill, they have the courage. What they don't have is authorization. Political constraints from Canberra prohibit cross-border operations. The policy is clear and absolute. Australian forces will not expand the war beyond South Vietnamese territory. The SAS can dominate Phuoc Tuy Province. They do dominate it. The enemy fears them. The statistics prove their excellence. But they cannot strike Base Area 367. They cannot hit the headquarters at COSVN. They cannot reach the infiltration routes that feed enemy forces into their operational area. They can see the enemy retreat across that invisible line. They can watch him regroup. They can track him as he prepares to come back. They cannot follow him across that border. Morrison's team receives intelligence reports throughout April and May. NVA resupply convoys crossing from Cambodia. Enemy units regrouping 15 kilometers beyond the border. Preparations for operations into Phuoc Tuy. Each report lists coordinates. Each coordinate is across the border. Each location is untouchable. The enemy knows Australian patrols stop at the border. He uses this knowledge. He builds his bases just out of reach. He times his movements to minimize exposure in areas where the SAS operates. He accepts casualties in South Vietnam because he knows his rear areas are safe. Australian excellence stops at a line on a map. The enemy lives on the other side of that line. Each report grows more frustrating. Each one lists targets Morrison's team could hit if the rules were different. Then, on May 24, 1968, everything comes to a head. Operation Mundingbura begins. Morrison's patrol receives unusual orders. Track D 445 battalion elements withdrawing toward Cambodia after contact with 6 RAR. Follow them to the border. Report sanctuary locations. The final instruction comes through crystal clear. Do not cross into Cambodian territory. Repeat, do not cross the border. The 4-man team picks up the trail at 0200 hours. 60 Viet Cong moving northwest through the Mae Tao Mountains. The tracks are fresh. Boot prints in mud still wet. Broken vegetation still green. The enemy is maybe 2 hours ahead, moving fast. They know they're close to safety. Morrison's team follows. They move faster than usual, but stay silent. Speed without noise takes practice, takes discipline, takes years of training that most soldiers never get. The scout reads sign even in darkness, a disturbed rock here, a scuff mark on a tree root there. The enemy leaves a trail like breadcrumbs if you know how to see it. By 0400 hours, the VC establish a temporary camp. They're 8 kilometers from the border now, close enough to taste safety. Their security gets sloppy. Sentries sit instead of stand. Soldiers talk in normal voices instead of whispers. They light small fires to heat tea. The smell of wood smoke drifts through the jungle. They think the danger is behind them. Morrison watches through binoculars from 200 meters away. He counts heads. 62 enemy soldiers. He identifies weapons. AK-47 rifles, several RPG-7 rocket launchers, 2 light machine guns. He notes the condition of the troops. Tired but not exhausted. 1 man appears wounded, arm in a sling. The rest look combat ready. This is the decision every SAS patrol commander understands, but hates. Perfect intelligence target. Enemy concentration in the open. Fire mission available. Artillery can reach this location. Air support could be overhead in 20 minutes. But the order is clear. Observe and report. Do not engage unless engaged first. Morrison calls in coordinates. Gives detailed composition, requests fire mission. The response comes back within 5 minutes. Negative on fire mission. Enemy too close to border. Risk of rounds falling into Cambodian territory. Continue surveillance. Report movement. The sun rises at 0630 hours. The VC break camp. They move northwest again. Discipline improves slightly with daylight. Security elements spread wider. But they're still moving fast, still focused on reaching that border. Still thinking they're almost home. Morrison's team follows. The patrol stays 300 meters back, far enough to avoid contact, close enough to maintain visual through breaks in the canopy. The jungle here is triple canopy rainforest, primary canopy at 40 meters, secondary at 20 meters, undergrowth at ground level. Visibility varies from 5 meters to 50, depending on the terrain. By 1100 hours, they're 2 kilometers from the border. Morrison can feel the tension in his team. They all know what's coming. They all know what they can't do about it. Kearney is on point. His jaw is tight. His knuckles white on his rifle. He wants to fight. Morrison understands. Morrison felt the same way 6 months ago. The VC cross into Cambodian territory at 1145 hours. There's no fence, no sign, no marker. Just an imaginary line that changes everything. The enemy knows exactly where it is. They relax immediately. Weapons go to safe. Soldiers light cigarettes. Some laugh. The transformation is instant and complete. Morrison watches through binoculars as they reach base area 367. The base is larger than intelligence estimated. Thatched barracks in neat rows. Supply dumps covered with camouflage netting. Training areas cleared from the jungle. A headquarters building with radio antennas. He counts 300 to 400 personnel visible. This is a regimental assembly area, maybe more. The intelligence value is enormous. Exact coordinates, detailed layout, troop strength, infrastructure. This information could save Australian lives, could disrupt enemy operations for months, could justify a major operation if anyone was authorized to conduct one. Morrison transmits everything: coordinates, composition, estimated strength, building locations. He uses coded language, but the message is clear. This is a major enemy installation operating openly in sanctuary. The response comes back in 20 minutes. Acknowledged. Target in denied territory. Continue surveillance from authorized area. No further action authorized. No B-52 strike. No tactical air. No artillery. No cross-border raid. Just acknowledgement and orders to keep watching from the wrong side of an invisible line. The same day, 200 kilometers north, Ken Carpenter's SOG team crosses into Laos at 0500 hours. Their target is a suspected NVA divisional headquarters. Intelligence suggests it's a major command and control node. If intelligence is right, this is worth hitting hard. They move 6 kilometers in 3 hours. Fast for jungle movement. Aggressive. They have dedicated air assets overhead. 2 F-4 Phantoms circling at altitude. 1 AC-130 gunship on station. Extraction helicopters 15 minutes away. They can afford to move fast because they have support that can reach them. At 0815 hours, they locate the target. Bunker complex built into a hillside. Radio antennas extending above the canopy. Officer quarters with wooden floors instead of dirt. Guard posts with fresh positions. This is exactly what intelligence said it would be. Carpenter doesn't hesitate. He calls in the airstrike. F-4 Phantoms roll in at 0835 hours. 500-pound bombs first. The hillside erupts in brown smoke and flying dirt. Then napalm. Orange flame washes through the complex. Cluster munitions next. Hundreds of small explosions ripple across the target area. The noise is incredible. The concussion feels like being punched in the chest from 400 meters away. The complex disintegrates. Bunkers collapse. Buildings burn. Secondary explosions as ammunition cooks off. One explosion is big enough to suggest a fuel storage area going up. Black smoke rises in a column that reaches 1,000 meters. The smell of burning wood and chemicals drifts downwind. Carpenter's team moves in during the smoke. Battle damage assessment is part of the mission. They need proof of what they hit. The ground is hot, still smoking. Bodies everywhere. Some burned beyond recognition. Others torn apart by cluster munitions. The count reaches 40 confirmed dead. Probably more buried in collapsed bunkers. They recover documents from the headquarters building, maps with operational overlays, code books, radio schedules, communications equipment destroyed, but still valuable to intelligence analysts. The documents reveal plans for attacks into First Corps, attacks that won't happen now because the headquarters planning them is gone. By 10:30 hours, Carpenter's team is extracted by Huey helicopter. Mission successful. Enemy casualties confirmed, intelligence recovered, strategic disruption achieved. They'll be back at base by lunch. Hot meal, cold beer, debrief with intelligence officers who actually care about what they found. The statistics by December 1968 tell two different stories. Australian SAS in Phuoc Tuy Province achieves an 18-to-1 kill ratio. Friendly casualties in their area of operations drop by 60%. D445 Battalion combat effectiveness reduced by 40%. 0 cross-border operations conducted. MACV SOG runs 159 operations into Cambodia, Laos, and North Vietnam. Estimated 10,000-plus enemy casualties. Hundreds of intelligence missions disrupting NVA logistics. B-52 strikes called on 37 major enemy installations. Strategic impact on enemy operations across multiple provinces. Australian SAS excellence is undeniable. Their mastery within constraints is complete. They are among the finest jungle fighters in military history. But constraints matter. Tactical perfection cannot substitute for strategic authorization. The enemy doesn't care how skilled you are if he knows exactly where you cannot go. He builds his bases there. He trains his soldiers there. He stores his supplies there. He plans his operations there. And he laughs because he knows you're watching from the wrong side of a line you cannot cross. By 1969, Australian SAS techniques spread through American units like wildfire. Word gets around. Stories travel from firebase to firebase. Those Australian ghosts in Phuoc Tuy are doing something different, something that works. American long-range reconnaissance patrols start adopting SAS methods. Smaller teams, slower movement, better noise discipline, more patience. U.S. Rangers request SAS advisors for their LRRP companies. The 1st Cavalry Division sends officers to observe Australian operations. They watch 4-man patrols disappear into jungle that swallows 30-man American units. They see the intelligence reports coming back. They note the kill ratios. They want to learn. Morrison spends 2 weeks teaching Ranger platoon leaders at Nui Dat. He shows them how to read sign, how to move without sound, how to survive on half rations for 3 weeks, how to call artillery danger close without killing your own team. The Americans are good students, motivated, professional. They take notes, they ask smart questions. They practice the techniques until their hands bleed. But the reverse never happens. No Australian unit receives authorization for cross-border operations. The political decision is absolute and unchanging. Australia will not expand the war beyond South Vietnamese territory. The policy comes from Canberra. The reasoning probably involves international law, diplomatic relations, and political considerations that make sense in air-conditioned offices. Out in the jungle, it just means there are places Australian soldiers cannot go. The SAS can teach Americans how to move silently. They can share techniques for reading terrain and tracking enemy movement. They can demonstrate patience and discipline that most armies never achieve. But they cannot reach enemy strategic depth that SOG teams strike routinely. They cannot follow the enemy to his home. They cannot burn his supplies where he stores them. They cannot kill his officers where they plan operations. The invisible line on the map remains absolute. Morrison completes his tour in March 1969. 12 months in country, 43 missions, 9 contacts with the enemy, 73 confirmed enemy casualties, 0 friendly losses from his patrols. Intelligence value rated critical on 16 separate operations. By every tactical measure, his record is exceptional. By any standard, he performed with distinction. He files his last intelligence report on March 18th. NVA 274th Regiment Headquarters, operating from Base Area 367. Same location he observed 10 months earlier. Same bunkers, same supply dumps, same training areas, still untouched. Still supplying operations into Phuoc Tuy, still safe behind that invisible line. Morrison flies out of Nui Dat on March 20. The caribou transport climbs through humid air that shimmers with heat. He looks down at the jungle spreading in every direction. Endless green, hiding endless danger. Somewhere down there, his replacement is already on patrol, learning the same lessons, facing the same constraints, perfecting tactics inside the same box. 5 months later, a different story unfolds. 200 kilometers north, Ken Carpenter completes his 2nd SOG tour in August 1969. 31 cross-border operations, 15 B-52 strikes called on enemy installations, disrupted logistics across the entire tri-border region. His teams have gone places the enemy thought were safe. They've proven that nowhere is safe when you have authorization to go everywhere. The NVA adapts to SOG pressure. They increase security at rear bases. They disperse installations instead of concentrating them. They harden infrastructure with deeper bunkers and better camouflage. They move at night more. They trust sanctuary less. But the strategic pressure never stops. Every time they think they're safe, another SOG team appears. Every time they concentrate forces, B-52s turn the area into a moonscape. The lesson writes itself across the jungle in smoke and blood. Tactical excellence without strategic freedom is brilliance trapped in a cage. Australian SAS proved they were among the finest jungle fighters in military history. Their techniques were copied by armies around the world. Their discipline became legendary. Their effectiveness was measurable and undeniable. But MACV SOG proved that reaching the enemy where he lives matters more than perfect tactics inside boundaries. Cross-border authority was the decisive factor. Not courage, not skill, not technique, authorization, permission, political will. The difference between watching the enemy across an invisible line and burning his headquarters to the ground. Post-war analysis reveals numbers that confirm what everyone already knew. Australian SAS killed or captured over 500 enemy soldiers in Phuoc Tuy Province. Impressive, honorable, tactically brilliant. MACV SOG operations forced the NVA to divert 30,000 troops to rear area security, troops that could have fought in South Vietnam, troops that instead guarded supply routes and headquarters from American raiders. That's strategic impact. Enemy documents captured when Saigon fell in 1975 reference SOG operations specifically. Internal NVA reports describe cross-border raids as a strategic threat, requiring divisional-level response. Planning documents allocate entire battalions to protect rear areas from American special operations. The enemy took SOG seriously because SOG could reach them anywhere. No similar documents reference Australian SAS as requiring strategic-level countermeasures. Not because the SAS wasn't dangerous, they were extremely dangerous, but dangerous within a limited area. The enemy could avoid Phuoc Tuy Province. He could operate from sanctuary. He could retreat when pressed. Australian excellence was real, but geographically contained. The Americans lost Vietnam despite MACV SOG effectiveness. All those cross-border raids, all those B-52 strikes, all that disrupted logistics, all that enemy fear, none of it changed the final outcome. The war was lost for reasons that had nothing to do with special operations. The Australians withdrew with tactical honor, despite SAS excellence. Their soldiers performed magnificently within the constraints given. They achieved results that exceeded expectations. They came home with their reputation intact. But they also came home knowing they fought with one hand tied behind their back. Neither tactical brilliance nor strategic authorization could overcome the fundamental problems with the war itself. The enemy had will. The enemy had time. The enemy had patience. The enemy had political support from China and the Soviet Union. The enemy believed in his cause. The enemy was willing to die in numbers that shocked Western observers. No amount of cross-border raiding could change those facts. Today, Special Operations Doctrine reflects the SOG model. U.S. Special Forces, British SAS, Australian SASR, they all operate under authorities that permit reaching enemy sanctuaries. The lesson from 1968 became institutional. Elite forces without strategic reach are wasted potential. You need the best soldiers, you need the best training, you need the best equipment, and you need permission to go wherever the mission requires. The jungle has reclaimed Base Area 367. 58 years of weather and growth have erased the bunkers. The barracks rotted decades ago. The supply dumps are buried under layers of dead leaves and new vegetation. Farmers find shell casings when they clear land. Rusted equipment pokes through the soil. Unexploded ordnance still kills people occasionally. The firebase at Nui Dat is gone. The bunkers collapsed. The perimeter wire rusted away. The helicopter pads disappeared under elephant grass. The patrol routes are invisible beneath secondary growth. Nature doesn't care about tactical excellence or strategic constraints. Nature just grows. Somewhere in those hills, you can almost hear Morrison's team moving silent through elephant grass, tracking an enemy they could observe but never fully reach, perfecting techniques inside boundaries they couldn't cross. And somewhere across that invisible border, you can almost hear the thunder of B-52s hitting targets that Australian excellence could only watch. Two different wars, two different sets of rules. Same jungle, same enemy, different authorizations. Australian SAS raids were tactically superior to many MACV SOG operations. Man for man, patrol for patrol, the Australians were arguably better jungle fighters. But their raids stopped at the border, while SOG raids reached enemy sanctuaries. That's why Australia's SAS raids couldn't match MACV SOG missions. Not because they couldn't, because they weren't allowed to. The raids themselves were never the problem. The restrictions on where those raids could go decided everything.